More than 8 years ago, I decided that I was going to retire, and one of my long-term goals was to put in a high-end simulator training company to try to help the general aviation population. Since we owned two twin Cessnas and several other airplanes, and since I had spent almost 30 years in aviation accident law, reviewing accidents, it became fairly evident that there was a weak area in the training programs for turbocharged pressurized airplanes. After numerous accidents that I dealt with and investigated, I wanted to try to put a program together that would end up with pilots being able to handle things like engine losses, fires, rapid descents, instrument conditions, taking off, and how to go to the panel and adequately and correctly read the gauges to maintain a climb out. I had years teaching instruments. I had years teaching multi-engine training. I had years doing large turboprop jet type aircraft. So what I decided to do was to look at what was out on the market and to see what they were doing. It became fairly evident that some of these companies were doing just enough to keep the insurance companies happy. Now, if you don't keep the insurance companies happy, and the only way they're happy is not to pay out claims, I did this for 30 years, then they start raising your rates. If they continue to have to pay more to repair airplanes and they have to pay out large amounts on liability payments, then they're going to have to get the money back. Insurance companies look at long-term payouts on what is really a 5-year plan. You may be okay for 5 years as a group paying premiums, but at the end of 5 years, they look back to set new reserves, which are going to be a lot more money if they've had to pay out a lot to accidents. So we're here today after starting a small company in Santa Rosa, California. We had a summer home there in the wine country, loved it to pieces, but this little 2-sim operation started getting more and more calls. I had a couple of other instructors that did a great job. We had one retired DPE that had done 30 years as a DPE and had done over 6,000 pilots, and he worked on the instrument side. I worked on the multi-engine side, and I began to put programs together. I began to put ideas together on how you teach certain aspects of failures, not in the FAA way. My favorite is engine loss, everything forward gearing, flaps up, identify, verify, throttle, mixture prop, gas, mags, generator, go to the field, you bet. At 200 feet, you got a problem. I saw accidents over and over and over that were created because this method was arcane and outdated, and it never was right to begin with. I learned from my early teachings as an instrument instructor that the way that it was taught in the 50s, the 40s, 50s, and really early 60s, especially the way the Air Force did it, that we were not teaching that way in general aviation, that there were some key instruments that were primary, and it wasn't the one that was being taught. So we put the program together, and we began to see that it worked. I remember one pilot that I had who was a flight instructor and a lady, and she right off the bat had 2 engine failures in a 421C, 5 to 6 months apart. She took the training, and she told me after the first one, which was at 200 feet AGL, that she almost went back to the stinky thinking. She almost went back to the FA method. She even said, I picked out a spot to put the airplane down. And then she said, wait a minute. Rick and I drill this over and over and over. For 3 days, we drill these engine out procedures and the way we do it with a 4-step process and where to watch and keep your eyes and don't deviate. And she ended up saying, I ended up having more airplane than I needed. I feathered that right engine, plane flew, it climbed, I managed it and got it in. And 5 months later, I get another call. The left engine had thrown a rod over the Sierras, and she said it was a piece of cake. That 421, even with an unfeathered prop, because the engine locked up, she was able to get it down and land at an airport on the west side of Sierras. So we saw this program develop, and we began to take accidents and put more and more emphasis on training for these accidents. We are now up to 40 to 45 emergencies that we teach in the sim. Now, we're not going to read a book to you. You're not going to walk in every year to satisfy the insurance companies and go through the same pages you went through the previous year. We're going to look at new problems that developed. One of my instructors, who actually is in charge of handling everything and really is the director of operations, sends me emails at 6 o'clock in the morning, we lost another one. And we need to start teaching this method and a method to prevent that. That's what we do. And then in the meantime, I get to sit in front of the students, pilots, shouldn't call them students, and I get to teach ground school. I get to teach what I've learned over 50 years about what makes these planes tick and what we need to do to maintain them, what we need to look for in those engine instruments to tell us that something's going on in that airplane engine and how to interpret it. That's one of my favorites. We catch a lot of professional pilots after they give me their answer and I say your answer is wrong, and then they think about it. I've had people come up to me and say, nobody ever taught me this. We show you our single engine stabilization approach. We call it stabilizing the aircraft, stabilizing the panel. And I've had people come to me and said, well, this is easy. Why is it not taught? And then we have the people that send us the emails who've lost these engines and who have told us that, they were disciplined to fly the airplane, and if they'd have gone back to the old method, they would have lost the airplane. So that's what we do. We're going to spend a time with you with one instructor on one sim going over the program that you need. This is not a group scenario. Now, we do work the ground school with groups, but when you're in the sim, you're given one sim, one motion sim, one instructor, and they're yours. Okay, we're going to look at your weaknesses and really your strengths. We get a lot of good pilots. We get a lot of good pilots who just don't understand that when it hits the fan, that they need to know what to do. And they will admit that they don't know what to do. So we take these excellent pilots who really have the ability to learn, and we show them an easier way to what we call get the pucker factor down. So when you lose an engine, or you have a failure, or you have rapid descent because of fire, here goes your pucker factor. We want to get rid of the pucker factor, because if your pucker factor goes up on a problem, then your thought process is out the window. The only way you're going to be able to get your pucker factor down to reality is to train. It's to drill. I talk about the B-26 Marauder that went down to Eglin, and I tell the story about how they sent them down there in early 42, Glenn Martin Company. It was a fast airplane, thin wing, big engines, and they lost the airplane right off the bat. Why? Because it would VMC at 145 miles an hour. Okay, they rolled them upside down. There was no training. Doolittle goes down there because Hap Arnold says, Truman's on me to kill this program. And Doolittle, who had a doctorate in aeronautical engineering, basically said, I got the answer. Hap Arnold thought it was structural. Doolittle said, there's no training. They're not using the airplane correctly. Well, this is what's wrong with general aviation today on these large airplanes. People with money are coming out with 300 to 400 hours and buying these large twin pressurized airplanes, and they're walking time bombs. And the males, with all due respect, are the worst. Oh, it'll never happen to me. Yet I know that they sit on the end of a runway hoping and praying that that plane doesn't lose an engine. I know they do that. Well, we're going to teach you what your thought process needs to be as soon as you start going forward on those throttles. We're going to give you a discipline to make you a better pilot. And this is what the airlines do. General aviation is not doing that. Some of the facilities out there that are signing you off for insurance training, I, in all due respect, as an aviation attorney, don't know how they're holding their head up. We're not going to do that. We're going to do the best to train you for the innocent people in the back of the airplane. We've got 8 years in. We are doing 25 to 30 pilots a month. We're staying 8 weeks behind on logging. We're fixing to put in some new simulators and add on to our main building. We wish we could be in some other place besides Burnet, Texas, but we had a reason for that. We were able to buy our own property, build our own hangars. We had to store our own airplanes because we use our 340 and 421C that we teach in and fly for training purposes. We're not going to only put you in the sim. We'll take you out to our planes and we'll go through the aircraft itself. We'll plug in our fancy GPU and go through instrumentation and go through navigation and radios. You know, our instructors have flown these planes. Our instructors know about these planes. We're here to challenge you. It's the only way we're going to get the pucker factor down. So if you're interested in contacting us, give us a call. Scheduling, we'll talk to you. I have nothing to do with scheduling anymore. I have really nothing to do except teach ground school. My instructors will work with you and talk to you. If you'd like to talk to them about your level of expertise, they will put a plan together for you. This is the way it needs to be. No canned programs. We find out where you're strong, we find out where you're weak, and bring the weak up to the strong. You can fly these planes on one engine. Believe me, you can. Now, if you load them up, 421C with 8 people, all the fuel and 300 pounds of baggage, you've got a little bit of problem. But we're going to teach you how to use some common sense. So give us a call, aircraft simulator training. Check us out on the web, www.aircraftsimulatortraining.com. We have a 24/7 phone number, and scheduling will get back with you. And if you need to talk to an instructor, they'll give you a call back. I'm Rick McGuire. Thank you for coming to us and for listening to us. And if we can help you make you a better pilot and a safer, more confident pilot and get that pucker factor down, give us a call.